Good afternoon again, everybody. We are going to go ahead and make a start. We're still waiting for one more person, but with any luck, by the time we actually start with the content, they will be with us online. This week, I want to welcome you all back to session 7. We had apologies from Karen and Amanda, who are not able to be with us this afternoon. So there are 10 of us this afternoon, and we have formed your paired discussion groups today based on your locations are based on cases where we know that people are working together on a similar lesson study question. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started today. Again, you all have your webcam turned off and you've muted your microphone. When we call on you, please open your microphone so that we can hear you. At any time during this afternoon's session, if you need to contact us, please type an asterisk into the chat box and we will we'll open your microphone and we will continue the chat in the chat box. And again, to let you know that this session will be recorded and it will be available to view afterward. Again, today we are going to be using 2 different ways to communicate. We are going to be using GoToMeeting for this part of our session, and then it will be up to the individual groups who are meeting offline, whether you use Skype or whether you use another technology. Again, I know that different people have had some issues with Skype in past sessions. So when we do go to those small group discussions, please use whatever technology works best for you. And if you do need to communicate with people that you're paired with to let them know what that is, you can use the chat box. Today's pairings, we're going to have Julia and Kate working together because we know that both of you are working on science questions. We're going to have Jane and Denise working together because both of you are working on language questions. We have Mary, Nilu, and Richard working together. I know that you are not working on similar questions, but because you are all based at the same campus, I'm hoping that you are going to be able to support one another as you begin to use lesson study in your practice. And finally, we have Barbara, Stephanie, and Charlene, who are not only all on the same campus, but you all are working on a similar question. So today, again, we've tried to pair people in groups to kind of get you ready to support one another as you begin to use lesson study in your professional practice. Before we start the session, does anyone have any questions about things from previous sessions, about things that I asked you to do in preparation for today's session? If you have a question that you would like to ask at this time, please type an asterisk into the chat box. Okay, it looks like there are no questions at this time. Again, there'll be many points during the session tonight that you can ask questions. We are going to move on to the focus questions for session 7. So in this session, I would like you to think about, and you've done some preparation around these questions, what did the observers see during the research lesson, and what did I learn from the observers? So this session is all about the post-lesson discussion. How you prepare for it, how you organize it, how you run it, and what you do with the information after the session is completed. And just as in the other sessions, we're going to start out with a little bit of content. I put together another Adobe Voice Spark video that both summarizes the information that you looked at in the video and in the brief reading piece I gave you, but it also adds a little bit of extra information. So we'll go ahead and show the video now.
Hello, and welcome to the 7th of 8 sessions, designed to help you build the knowledge, understanding, and skills you will need to engage in lesson study. I'm Ben Wren, the head of the Center for Inspiring Minds. This short video will introduce you to methods for planning, running, and reflecting on the post-lesson discussions that will take place following your research lesson. In the earlier sessions, we talked about the importance of having a focused research question. A question asking how your research-informed instructional method will help a targeted group of students master a specific performance or learning goal. You also developed focus questions, questions that the research lesson observers are trying to answer as they observe target students' performance and learning during the research lesson. The nature of the focus questions determine the kind of data that observers would record and the ways they would analyze or process the data they collected, in order to respond to the focus questions and contribute to the discussions about the research question in the post-lesson discussion. In this session, we want to introduce several methods for conducting the post-lesson discussion. We recommend that you plan to conduct the post-lesson discussion within 24 hours of the research lesson, preferably on the same day. So it's important to plan for the post-lesson discussion at the same time you are designing the research lesson. A typical agenda for a post-lesson discussion is in 3 parts: a round robin of individual observer feedback, a whole group data discussion, and a whole group discussion about the research lesson and how it has provided information about the research question. Prior to the round robin, each observer should take time to review their individual observation notes and perform any data analysis or data processing needed to respond to the focus questions. During the round robin, each observer should have a specified amount of time to share their observation data with the group. During the whole group data discussion that follows the round robin, all members of the research lesson team consider what the observers have reported. This is a time for comparing and discussing different students' responses to the research lesson based on the data. The final plenary discussion provides an opportunity for the members of the research team to reflect on their expectations for how the target students would respond to the research lesson, and to discuss how and why what actually happened was similar to or different from what they had anticipated. The post-lesson discussion may end with a brief discussion of subsequent planned research lesson cycles, or ways the practical knowledge gained through the lesson study process will be shared with others. To give this basic post-lesson discussion plan a bit more structure, you may consider using adapted microlab protocols. To use microlab protocols, you might approach the initial round-robin data sharing activity a bit differently. Specifically, you would ask observers to organize their data based on the focus questions, and solicit their responses to the focus questions one at a time. Beginning with the first focus question, the first observer would be given a predetermined period of time, usually about 2 to 3 minutes, to share what their data says about the first focus question. The other members of the team would be listening without speaking. After the first person is done, there's a brief period of silence, up to half a minute, so that everyone has a chance to process what they've heard. Members of the lesson study team may take notes during this time. Each observer follows the same procedure until everyone has spoken and the final period of silence has ended. Then a time-limited plenary discussion about what was heard follows. This method ensures that each observer has the same opportunity to share their data, and that the other members of the lesson study team have time to process what they are hearing between speakers. By considering each focus question separately, each is given equal importance in the discussion, and the data discussion and plenary that follows may be much richer and evidence-based. And like other lateral thinking methods, it helps avoid confusing discussions of 2 or more focus questions at the same time. If you involve a large number of observers in your research lesson, you may want to use a workshop-style approach to your post-lesson discussion. For example, you may ask the observers to record their observations on Post-it notes, 1 observation per Post-it note, and then invite them to post their observations on sheets of flip chart paper labeled with the focus questions. You could further organize each focus question sheet and ask them to distinguish between observations of performance versus observations of learning, or other criteria relevant to the focus or research question. In this workshop-style approach, the data discussion and plenary proceed without the time-consuming individual observation recounts. A completely different approach to the post-lesson discussion is stimulated recall. Using this approach, the research lesson is also filmed. At the end of the research lesson, which may end before the end of the class period, students are asked to view all or selected parts of the video and to respond to a written set of questions. The questions probe students' cognitive and affective responses to the research lesson and may include, what were you thinking? Why were you thinking that? How were you feeling about your learning at that moment? And why did you feel that way? This method helps the lesson study team see the research lesson from the student's point of view. It helps teachers better understand how students feel about their learning, what they enjoyed, and what they found challenging. Whatever method you choose for conducting your post-lesson discussion, the most important thing to consider is how you will reveal and discuss the practical knowledge arising from the research lesson. How will you use this knowledge to inform your wider teaching practice? And how will you share your new practical knowledge about effective teaching and learning with others in your school or in the wider education community? Session 8 will be a one-to-one meeting with the course tutors. During the one-to-one meeting, we will be asking you to tell us about your course experience and about how you may use what you learned in your professional practice. Thank you for your participation in the course. We look forward to working with you in the future.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm just wondering if after viewing that short video, you have any questions at this point. Again, if you have a question, if you just type an asterisk in the box and we will open your microphone. Okay, I don't see any questions right now, so we will move right into our paired discussions for the afternoon. And again, our pairings are Julia and Kate, Jane and Denise, Mary, Nilu and Richard, and Barbara, Stephanie, and Charlene. Let me give you the directions for the paired discussion, and then you can get started. This is a very similar discussion to the ones that we've done in the past. I want you to think about your responses to Learning Log 7.1. Think about what you read in the course guide, what you saw in the video, what you read in that short excerpt from the lesson study handbook, and what you saw even in the Adobe Spark video that you just watched. And with the people who you're meeting with, I want you to talk about how those practices or ideas connect to your prior knowledge and practice, how they extend your thinking, and how they challenge your thinking. What new questions do they raise for you? As in the past, you're going to have 15 minutes for this paired discussion. We'll change the screen and let you know when there are 2 minutes remaining. And when you come back, we're going to ask you to share the highlights of your discussion with the group. And again, we're going to consider the questions one at a time. What did you learn or see that connects to your prior knowledge and practice? What extends it? And what challenges it? So if you would, go ahead and please begin your paired discussions. All right, welcome back, everybody. Next slide. Yeah. So we're going to go through the questions one at a time, and if you'd like to share a little bit about what you talked about in your pair or in your group, and we're going to start with how do these practices or ideas connect to your prior knowledge and practice. And again, if you're willing to kind of share what you've been talking about, if you type an asterisk into the box, and we will unmute your microphone. So again, if you would like to share a little bit about what your group talked about, if you will type an asterisk into the box. Richard, we're going to unmute your microphone if you want to open your microphone as well.
Okay, hello.
Hi, go ahead.
We found it a bit hard in some ways to separate out the three questions from each other, the connecting and the extending and the challenging. But in general, we thought the protocol's perhaps a bit prescriptive for free discussion, certainly for the age group of the students we're concerned with. And we're quite interested in the video. We saw that the women there were making a lot of use of post-it notes, and so they had some visualization of their observations. We thought we'd rather have a rather freer approach where you've got the evidence, if you like, for the observations up there, and then you go straight from there to a discussion of it. So moving away from the protocols towards the sticky notes. The end.
Yep. Great, Richard. Thank you for that. And again, just to restate what was mentioned in the video, that there is no one correct way to do the post-lesson discussion, that whatever is the right way for your particular lesson study group to do it. So if the post-it notes make the most sense because it does provide that visual record, then certainly that's what you should use. Richard, thank you for that. We're going to go to Denise now.
Okay, go ahead, Denise.
Hi. I was lucky enough to have a lesson study done in my class last year. And I know that this connected what we read about for today and watched connected a lot to some of the activities and the planning and the post sessions that I had been involved through the process of that lesson study. But what I think was great when we did it is that our facilitator, who was Ben, was very strict with them in the post meeting to actually follow that protocol of one person talks at a time, and very focused on the types of questions or the types of observations that had been made to make it very objective. And I think that worked really well, because as a teacher you got to see and hear from the three observers exactly what the students had demonstrated or had experienced, or they could see through their participation, and that was an amazing process. So I really connected with all of that.
Great, thank you, Denise. And of course, in those situations where you might decide to use a bit more structure, one of the main reasons to do that is to try to focus the meeting so that you get the most information that you can in the amount of time that you've allocated for the meeting. Time is the most precious resource in this whole process, and so the best use that you can make of that time, any tool that allows you to make better use of the time or optimize the time, typically works out really well for people. Barbara, we're going to go to you next. If you'd like to unmute your microphone, please. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, hi. So yesterday we had to meet with Steve to talk about how we're going to present the peer coaching to the school, and we came up with an idea with Ishan to actually do a peer coaching come lesson study on Ishan. And today we met for the I know this is about post observations, but we met for the pre-observation, and when we were talking, we were able to connect sort of that prior knowledge, connect the peer coaching to the lesson study and how the three of us are going to go on with this. And we're actually going to observe sort of Ishan on Thursday using the lesson study technique, and it was really good for the three of us and Ishan and the other peer coaches to sort of get together and talk about this. And for me, for all three of us, that was just a great connection today.
Great, Barbara. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, one of the things that we'll mention just briefly at the end of this session is how you begin to think about cascading this knowledge that you've developed through your participation in the course to other people. And it sounds like the group in Doha is already well on their way to thinking about how to do that. We're going to move on to the next question now. And as Richard said, it is often difficult to distinguish the part of your discussion that is about connecting and extending and challenging. This question is about extending, but if you have a response that relates to any of those questions, please do share it with us. And again, if you type an asterisk into the box, we will open your microphone. Let's actually combine this, since no one is putting up a response quickly, let's actually combine this with the final question, which is how the practices challenge your thinking or practice. So in other words, what questions does this raise? What questions do you have now after having seen the kind of the different approaches that you could take to the post-lesson discussion? And again, if you type a message in the box, we have Kate first, and then we'll go to Jane. So Kate, if you'd like to unmute your microphone, please. Yep, go ahead, Kate.
This is actually Julia sitting next to me.
Hi, Julia.
I wonder, about I feel that to come up with this level of investment with a 45-minute meeting, all your people sitting down, you've got to come up with something really good that is a new strategy to put in. We spend quite a lot of time in our thing talking or disagreeing about that. So now you can have the Kate version of the same thing.
Oh no. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I was just saying that yeah, you might not come up with amazing interventions for that specific thing that you're doing, but just that act of doing this in a collaborative environment might improve teaching and be worth the invested time anyway.
Yeah, and guys, I mean, that really is one of the big questions around lesson study. How do you use this lesson study time to effectively advance your professional practice? And sometimes, as you said, sometimes the big challenge for you might be, how do I introduce some new instructional approaches or instructional strategies? But equally important, this is probably more common where you're working in a group where people teach the same grade level or the same grade level and the same subject. You may find that there is something that you teach that every time you teach it, it's not quite as successful as it can be. And you may use lesson study to try to unpick or discover what it is about the way that you approach a topic or an activity that makes it less than, that prevents it from achieving that level of success that you had in mind. But yes, always deciding what the focus of the lesson study is. Is it about something that's new? Is it about something that addresses a problem? And I will say that sometimes lesson study does approach something very, very familiar to really confirm that, you know, what the learning coming out of that very familiar approach is what you actually think it is. So again, there's no right or wrong way to do that, and you know, great that you're asking those questions. We're going to go to Jane now. Jane, would you like to open your microphone, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Denise and I were having a chat about stimulated recall, and it struck us that in our situation where, with looking at our NNE program and the range of interventions and focus questions and instructional approaches we could choose to target is fairly awe-inspiring and quite broad. And so a way for us to actually narrow down that choice of focus, we thought that we could actually use stimulated recall as a baseline evidence gathering instrument by filming a lesson that the tutor gives, and then in the same way as you would with students, have them respond to written questions about certain parts of the film when they watch it back. And then the discussion and reflection that arises from that could actually give rise to the choice of your focus point or the instructional approach that you might use. So one way of just narrowing down and beginning this process for us.
Jane, thank you for that. I'm really glad that resonated with you, and I hope it resonated with some other people as well, the use of stimulated recall. I do have to apologize for kind of lobbing that into the course kind of at the 11th hour. It wasn't mentioned in the printed material that I sent you in advance, and in fact, just last week at the end of the week, I attended a lesson study network meeting at the Institute of Education, and the woman who leads that program for the IOE had just come back from the International Lesson Study Conference in Japan, where one of the big focus areas that you could follow through the conference were kind of emerging ideas about post-lesson discussion. And she presented both this stimulated recall and the workshop model and some other models that no one in the group had really ever seen before. So I'm great that you connected with that idea. And if you want to try to find some additional materials about that particular protocol, let me know and I will see what I can find. We're going to go to Barbara again. Barbara?
Hi. So, you know, the funny thing today was when it came to being challenged was, so we were talking to Ishan about how she's going to go about her lesson. And again, we kept forgetting that we were going to be observing the children, and we kept jumping in from a peer coaching sort of point of view as well. We kept trying to jump in to say, oh, but you should do this, or maybe you should do that. And getting thinking that we should, you know, we're observing the children and letting the person who's teaching the lesson come up with ideas of sort of what she can do to change her strategy. I don't know, is it bad feedback?
Barbara, I think that as soon as you make that transition to actually create those dates and those that just that little bit of structure will, I think, shift what actually happens during the lesson study process and the kind of information that you collect and discuss afterward.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, when last year was really, I'd known about lesson study for a long time, and when we did this pilot piece last year with Denise, it was the first time that other than watching videos, that I actually had watched it happen in real life. And the interesting thing is that it's one of these things where you just need to trust the process, and if you follow the process, it will take you where you need to go.
Yeah. Because Stephanie was the one who said, no, we need to stop giving suggestions. We need to observe, and then, you know, because teachers are naturally, well, why don't you do this? Or you should do this. It will happen, you know. So it's that sort of step above stepping back, watching what happens, and then sort of letting the person who's doing the lesson study sort of come up with those realizations to, oh, I could have done that differently, or I could have done that. Like those women who, when they were talking, and they were like, then they realized that none of them asked a question about the children sequencing their responses.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But again, it's really great that you're actually recognizing that for some people, this is going to be a very big shift in the way that they think about working collaboratively with other teachers. And being aware of that, and being sensitive to that, and being supportive of that transition is going to be really important to make lesson study, you know, the most positive experience it can be for everyone involved, because it is intended to be a positive professional collaboration experience. So Barbara, thank you for that. We're going to go on to the next part of this afternoon's session, and I'm going to ask you to take out your responses to Learning Log 2. And this was a series of statements I used to think, but now I think. And I really tried to challenge you to do this a number of times. And the reason that I want you to do it more than once is the first time that you come up with a response to a question like this, it's probably a response that is pretty obvious, and probably something that was something you've been thinking about for a long time. But the act of having to answer this question 5 times means that each time you had to think a little bit deeper. You had to think a little bit more complexly about what we've been doing. And so what I'd like you to do is simply share and discuss your responses to those prompts with the people who you're paired with this afternoon. We're going to give you 10 minutes. We're going to start right now. We'll change the screen when there are 2 minutes left to let you know that the time is coming to a close. Please go ahead and get started. All right, welcome back, everybody. So we're going to use a format similar to the one we've used in the previous weeks, and we're going to use a round robin and give everyone a chance to respond, to either tell us how they responded to this question, or what you talked about, or just anything that you'd like to add to our discussion this afternoon. We will unmute your microphones one at a time, and we'll follow the sequence that you can see here in the list. So we'll be starting with Julia and ending with Charlene. So Julia, as soon as you're ready, if you would like to open your microphone, please. So Julia. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
I'm glad to see that I'm first today rather than last.
Yeah.
I started doing the lesson study because I am a peer coach, and I felt after the Steve Berkeley presentation that I didn't have the skills to help people go from get their focused question and work out what the data is. And so that's what I used to think, and what I think now, that I do have all those skills, but I feel a lot less stressed about it.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Is Kate right there beside you?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I really didn't like this question. I couldn't answer it. Just, I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm no good at those kind of questions. But I agree with Julia. I do feel much happier about the skills I don't have peer coaching that I didn't feel I had, but now I feel much more confident about it and much more blasé about it. Yeah.
Great, Kate. Thank you for that. We're going to open Jane's microphone next. So Jane, if you want to unmute your microphone, go ahead, please.
Okay. I used to think that approaching improving student learning outcomes one focused question at a time, when there was such a vast array of work to be done in any particular population of teachers or professionals, was very time consuming and not terribly efficient, and that how would you ever reach as many foci as you needed to. But I now think that once you've done this once or twice or even 3 times or so, and you've internalized the process that is lesson study, I think that's what has the value. I think going through this a number of times teaches you to think in a different way about your lesson planning, the outcomes, and your approaches. So I think the value is in the actual process itself.
Great. Jane, thank you very much. We're going to unmute Denise's microphone next. So Denise, if you would like to do the same. Denise, are you there? If you're there, would you unmute your microphone? Go ahead, Denise.
Okay. So one of the things I wrote was a very basic, I used to think that because it's based on an Eastern philosophy of evaluation and in education, that the adapting it to Western culture and to our side of the world might not be optimal, I guess, in what it's trying to achieve. But one of the things we talked about with Jane was very clear, and that is, because it's so focused on student learning outcomes and what they, the feedback and the I guess, is formative assessment that we're gathering from them, it's very applicable because it's not about the curriculum or the ways to study or the culture or how teachers, what they do is are they reaching the students? Are they able to learn and show us that they're learning what we're teaching them? So I totally see that's not really relevant, but it's one of the things that I used to think and now have been clear about.
Denise, thank you for that. A really interesting story, a very, very quick piece from me, that one of the tipping points in kind of bringing lesson study from Japan to the US was when a group of American educators went to Japan to learn about lesson study. And in one of the very first lesson studies that they observed, they watched teachers teaching mathematics using what they perceived to be these incredible, innovative teaching techniques. And they asked those teachers how they learned those techniques. And the Japanese teachers told the American teachers that they'd come from America. And what tends to happen in the US and in big places like the UK is that there are all of these innovative ideas that are always bubbling up. But until you actually try them out and understand the efficacy of those particular instructional methods, they don't really take a foothold. And so again, for the American people who were visiting Japan to watch lesson study, what they recognized is that this really wasn't, that one of the things about this method was that it was a way to actually kind of broaden understanding and use of innovation that was coming out of research institutions and schools all across the country. So interesting that this kind of East-West piece and how I think that for many people it was a barrier for a very, very long time. Mary, go ahead and open your microphone, please. Go ahead.
Hello. Nilu and I were discussing the idea of input versus outcome when we plan a lesson study. And whereas we had both sort of agreed that we had originally thought it was about the outcome, we're now a lot more confident that it's about the input and the arrangement of the input. And we suggested, and maybe it's relevant to the difference between a primary and secondary situation as well, that planning the lesson study should bear student-led learning in mind, at least for high school, because in order to maintain a bias that doesn't involve the teacher's bias, so in order to make sure that the outcome is student-centered and not teacher bias dependent, the lesson study options and resources should be designed collaboratively with the student as the leader in mind, so that any output that we get can then be looked at collaboratively within the discipline and around the discipline to really broadly gauge what the students have provided for the lesson study. And then it will almost shape the outcome a little bit better, maybe differently to what the intention was, but knowing that it was a student-led outcome rather than a teacher-induced input, if that's clear.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely clear, Mary. And I think that one of the things that is interesting is that even that student collaboration can be the focus of a lesson study. Because in fact, if we all knew how to do that, and that was such an easy thing, everyone would be doing that already. And so just even understanding how you make that collaboration work effectively for the students so that the collaboration actually produces the thing that leads to the next part of the learning. I mean, what a great question for a lesson study. So thank you for that. We're going to go to Nilu.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nilu.
I think Mary has said what I wanted to say, because we discussed together, so she said a lot about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Barbara next.
For me, I used to think that, used to think sounds like long ago, but I think this has made it clear that it's not a mentoring thing, but more, sort of it's put it into perspective how mentoring is not peer coaching, and lesson study is about, it's not like when we get observed as teachers, this could maybe shift the whole sort of paradigm into looking at the children and seeing what they're learning and how they're learning, instead of looking at the teacher's delivery of the lesson, although they go hand in hand, of course, but looking at it from another perspective. I think that's how my thinking has shifted.
Yeah, Barbara, that's really interesting, because again, in the pilot work that we did, I found that when I began to really focus more on the student learning than the teacher learning, I had a hard time even going back and focusing on the teacher learning, because what the teacher was actually doing, because it in so many ways seemed so much less important in what was happening in the classroom to what the children were doing. So thank you for that. Stephanie, we're going to go ahead. If you'd open up your microphone, please. Stephanie, are you still there? Open up your microphone if you'd like to respond. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. I used to think that lesson study was more about mentoring and offering advice to peers, and now I know that it's extremely non-judgmental, and it's about helping the lesson study teacher through kind of reflective and structured conversation to come around to the solution to increase their learning on their own versus giving them advice.
Stephanie, thank you very much for that. And finally, Charlene, if you'd like to open your microphone, please. Go ahead, Charlene.
Hi. For me, it gave me insight into how lesson study could help to improve the practice of the teacher, but also then that would have a catalyst effect on the children's output. For me, that was big. I had very little understanding of lesson study before we started, and I am much more confident now that I know what to do once I'm observing inside a classroom and what I need to look for and how I can be using it when I'm structuring my own lessons for my own class.
Charlene, thank you very much for that. Just as one last piece, does anyone have anything else that they would like to contribute to this discussion? If you do, if you want to type an asterisk into the box and we will open your microphone. So if anyone said something that kind of got you thinking or that you want to just add something else here, just type an asterisk into the chat box. Mary, go ahead and unmute your microphone. Go ahead, Mary.
Thanks. I think one of the key things that also came up in our discussion was the ideas behind interdisciplinary learning, that this lesson study is a good opportunity to collaborate with staff from different departments to design a lesson study. And I'm encouraged by that from the videos and readings that I've done throughout the course. But I think that a lot of the course material focuses on primary school scenarios, where a lot of the teachers who are designing the lesson study all teach in similar age groups. But at high school, that's not quite how the lesson study would work out, because as well as accounting for age, you're looking at subject specificity. So taking an IDL approach might involve 2 to 3 people across different departments that connect the key skills you're trying to get out of the lesson study for the students. And then in terms of input and outcome, the analysis might also involve outcome analysis from each of the 2 or 3 people involved in that IDL team. It sort of supports the idea of using IDL, or in a science capacity using STEM learning, to work around the idea of lesson study as well, and maybe bring that even further than the lesson study structure itself might determine at any given time. It could be contributing to a whole movement within departments to expand the way that they teach their subject.
Mary, thank you very much for that. Yeah, and there's certainly kind of recognizing this is you know, that it could just be a starting point rather than, you know, the end point in terms of exploring how to use this. Thank you for that. We're going to go to Barbara.
Just in response to that, today when we were talking, I actually thought it would be really interesting to actually do some lesson studies in the middle high school. We have Marina, who teaches like super high level biology and science and physics and all of that, and I thought that would be really interesting to go into a class where it is really out of my sort of realm of knowledge, and observe the students, and then talk to her afterwards and get her feedback or give our input, or you know. So I think that is really interesting to go out of primary school.
Yeah, no, Barbara, thank you for that. Certainly in some of the schools where they're doing district level lessons, this whole idea of a horizontal lesson study team where you assemble a group of people who may teach different subjects at the same grade level, or a vertical lesson study team where you might have people who teach, you know, English or math, but people who teach at a whole range of grade levels. You know, again, personally, I don't think that you can walk away from one of those experiences without learning something that is relevant to your own practice, even if your practice is not exactly the same as the lesson that you're watching. So thank you both very much for that observation. In getting ready to close the session today, I did want to remind people of some upcoming opportunities, professional development opportunities through the Center for Inspiring Minds. If you were at all intrigued by this idea of dialogue protocols, we do have an after-school session that lasts about 90 minutes on dialogue protocols for professional collaboration. We did do this session in Doha in the beginning of September, and both Barbara and Stephanie were part of that workshop. We're going to be repeating that workshop on the 18th of January at ACS Cobham and on the 26th of January at ACS Hillingdon. We also have a related workshop called Visible Thinking for Professional Collaboration. And again, I think that it was Mary who talked about the use of the Post-it notes and how valuable that was in terms of making that professional dialogue more visible. In this Visible Thinking for Professional Collaboration workshop, we introduced 16 different visible thinking routines that you can use in professional collaboration. I should say that they all can be adapted for use with students in the classroom as well. They were originally designed for classroom use. We're going to be doing those on the 8th of December at ACS Hillingdon at the 9th of February, on the 9th of February at ACS Cobham. And I know that we have Jane there for Egham, and Jane, just to let you know that we are able to provide either of those workshops at Egham, provided we can get a group of 6 or more people who are interested in doing them. So if you think that either of those are of interest, maybe even to your NLE coordinators, just let us know and we will provide those by special arrangement. We also have our Getting Started with Action Research course beginning in January. Again, for those of you who enjoyed the lesson study piece and you're thinking that, well, maybe you're interested in something a little bit more formal or a little bit more structured, Getting Started with Action Research is a 10-week course delivered in the same way that this one is, online once a week. And one of the interesting things is that lesson study is a data collection method that you can actually use in your action research. So if you wanted to take your lesson study and then frame it as a more structured research question or research process, that the Getting Started with Action Research course would be something that would help you do that. And again, all of you probably know colleagues who you've talked about your participation in the course with. If you could let them know that the next opportunity to be part of this course begins on January the 25th and goes to the 22nd of March, when we will repeat this online course for other people. Another quick reminder that we are accepting proposals for SIM projects through the 25th of April. And again, lesson study is a perfectly reasonable research method to use in a research project. So if you wanted to talk to us more about how that would work or about an idea that you have for a SIM project for next year, please let us know as soon as you have an idea, because we will help you work on that project so you can meet that deadline of the 25th of April. And finally, on the 18th of May, we will have our celebration of learning. And we're going to be in contact with all of you to see what you've done with lesson study. And if you have done something with lesson study and you would like to share it with the wider school community at that event, we will be inviting you to make a presentation there. So kind of keep in mind that if you do actually use lesson study in your professional practice, think about how you document it, whether it's using photographs or keeping electronic records of things in preparation for making a presentation at that 18th of May event. Finally, just as with all the other sessions, there is a learning log to go with today's session. We will be sending you some materials for session 8. And in session 8, what you will find is a process guide for conducting lesson study with 14 or 15 different scaffolded templates to kind of that you might use through the process. The process flowchart is a summary of all of the work that we've done over our 8 weeks. And many of the templates are things that you've seen in different forms. Here they're presented as Word documents that you can take and adapt and use however you'd like to do that. We are going to be putting those lesson study resources and the dialogue protocols that we talked about today on our website. So if you visit the website in the new year, you'll find all those there. Some of them will actually send you links to with the information about the session 8 materials. We have recorded today's session, so that information will be also in that email. And as a final reminder, this was our last online group session. Session 8 is a one-to-one session, or if you'd like, a one-to-group. So if 3 of you are working on the same lesson study question and you would like me to meet with all of you at the same time, that is perfectly fine. Or if you'd like to have a one-to-one, we can schedule that as well. I'm going to ask you to please work with Latifa to book an appointment for that one-to-one. This is a 15 to 30-minute discussion. It can be longer if you want, but the starting one really is about 15 to 30 minutes. And we would like to complete those by the 6th of December, if possible. If that timeline doesn't work with you and it needs to be after the 6th of December, we will certainly do everything we can to accommodate that. So again, thank you very much for your participation in the course. I look forward to talking to each of you in our one-to-ones and learning more about how you plan to use lesson study. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Good.